Please welcome the incredible Alyson Caffrey.
Renee, thank you so much for having me.
Well, if you are not friends with her, you cannot call her Aly. Let's say Alyson.
You have to call me by my government name.
Your government name. Your government name. So I'm excited to chat because there's a couple things that you and I are going to talk about today. And first of all, I'm just going to plug the book. She authored a book called The Sabbatical Method: How to Leverage Rest and Grow Your Business. And if you are a listener to my show for a long time, you all know that I have two boys that are 11 months apart. And I also launched my first agency the same year as having those babies. There was a lot of stuff that, probably so many things that you could have taught me. And now that I'm out of the weeds of babies, everything has gotten a lot easier. But I go back on those days, there's probably a lot of stuff that you could have definitely taught me, whether it's in this book or in your program. So Aly, why don't you tell us what you do and who you do it for?
Yeah, so I help entrepreneurs create more sustainable and peaceful businesses. For the last 6 years at Operations Agency, I've been the woman behind the curtain of 8 and 9 figure companies, really streamlining the way they operate, documenting internal company information, and making sure that the business thrives independently of any one person. So your project manager leaves and out goes all that institutional knowledge. I help make sure that that doesn't happen. And for the last 2 years or so, specifically since I've had my 2 kiddos, I really work one-on-one with moms who are taking a maternity leave from their business and really want to do so profitably and kind of thrive through that experience instead of making it an experience that slows them down and that they ultimately feel like they kind of struggle through. So I have my iron in a lot of proverbial fires, right? But the real focus is making sure to create the systems and processes behind the scenes that allow our businesses to thrive. And really, so ultimately, we don't have a business that controls our family life or our personal life. We have a personal life that really informs how we want to grow in our business and doesn't feel really constraining.
Yeah. Oh, systems. Curious. You went through the official process to become a guest on the show from the form that you filled out, an intake form, and then scheduling. How was it? A rating out of 10. How would you say it was the experience?
I would say 12 out of 10, 12 out of 10. And you know what? I specifically appreciated one thing about your process was that a lot of shows don't send that top of mind reminder like an hour or 2 before. I was actually featured in over 80 media outlets in 2023, thanks to you and your process, Renee. It was amazing. And a lot of folks don't remind you. Like they ask you to just go and search your inbox for the last time that they mentioned what the link was to join or whatever. So I really appreciated that you did that top of mind for me today. So whenever we jumped in, I was like, oh, cool. And then you also added it to the calendar invite. So I felt very prepared.
Good. Well, I just set it up the way that I need it because we have so many emails and to go digging. It still surprises me today how many times I'm invited to an event, whether I'm speaking at an event or a friend's birthday, that they don't set up a calendar invite. And if they do, they don't put the location or any details. 2 extra seconds. Because the worst case scenario is people forget where they're going and they need to be reminded. And some people just in their phones, they'll click the location and it pulls up the map for their driving.
Exactly. Yeah, it's an absolute unlock. And, I always joke with my team. Have you ever seen that movie with Will Ferrell? It's The Legend of Ron Burgundy, like Anchorman. They joke, like he'll read anything on the teleprompter. I will do anything on my calendar. Like if it's on my calendar, you believe I'm there, I'm on time, I'm going wherever the location says. And if the location is like completely 2 hours in the other direction, I'll just be driving there. I'll have no idea what's going on.
Yeah, I can picture now Will Ferrell. So yes, and I have friends that still use and I'm not going to call her out, Anna, but
Poor Anna.
Paper calendar. And I remember like being on the phone with her saying, "Hey, are you free on this date?" And she goes, "I don't know. I'll have to go home and check my calendar." And I'm like, "How do you operate?" She sold her business. She's a very successful entrepreneur, and I don't understand how people can't work through a normal calendar.
I know a lot of paper people too, though. I really do. And I think like my husband, super offline. So our family calendar is in my calendar, but it's also posted in my kitchen so that Steve, my husband, like knows what's going on and what's happening. So I have to do a little bit of double work, but I've noticed that it makes up for itself in making sure that he's prepared and aware of what's going on.
That's hilarious. I have a whiteboard calendar in our kitchen for the kids because they always ask me, what day of the week is it? I go,
must be nice.
Yeah. Okay, so tell me, how did you get into all this? Was there like a rock bottom or like a soft bottom moment that you needed to operationalize something?
Yes and no. Not a rock bottom moment for me or a soft bottom moment for me, but for someone I was working for. So I was working at an agency a while back. I started with them in 2015 and I was with them until about 2017. So like two and a half years. And I remember my husband was being moved. So he had gotten this opportunity to join a special forces portion of the military. And we were like, whoa, this is a really cool opportunity. We really want to be able to do this. And it means that we needed to move. So I was in Colorado at the time and we moved over to Nashville, Tennessee. And I gave my boss at the time 2 weeks notice. And he was like, please, would you give me a 90-day transition period? I was operations manager at the time. We had about 30 team and he was just frightened. I think he was scared that I was going to go and that everything was going to kind of crumble. Things flowed through me. The business was great. It was thriving. And it was really in that position where we hadn't quite yet been able to define a project to actually formalize our operations function in the business. And so in a 90-day time frame, I gave that business the gift of here's everything lined out for you guys for the future growth of the team. I almost feel like I gave this individual their business back and like their life back in a little bit of a sense. And by the time I was done with that project, I was full with people requesting that I do the same thing for them. They were like, oh my God, could you just do this for me? I'm floundering. I have this company. It's super successful, but we just can't seem to get a handle on our projects, our operations, our people function. And so I was like, yeah, totally. I can do that. So I started being the best kept secret in operations around 2017, 2018. And I had no idea that I was going to do that because fun fact, when I sent my first invoice as a freelancer of operations, I was actually in LSAT courses studying to go to law school. I was convinced that that was my next phase of my life. And it was really interesting because it was actually one of the only things I didn't finish, like in life. When I make a commitment, I'm like, I have to follow through with this. I made the commitment. At the time, I mean, my husband and I were, way, way, way broke. Like it was $1,200 to do this course. And I remember being like, we need to put this on a credit card and pay it off over like the maximum amount of time that is currently possible. And it was a big stretch for me to like actually invest and do that course. And I remember being like, I can't believe I'm going to quit this because I've overnight like created this new way of like bringing intentional revenue into my home. And it was really, really cool. So I had no idea that I was going to go off on my own. And it just kind of fell into place in this way that felt really, really great and life-giving.
What was the first thing you did? Your first project?
My first project on my own?
Yeah.
Our mutual friend, I think, Uriel Kame, had an event called Healthpreneur Live. And he had worked with me in the 9-to-5 I was in before. And he said, I need a person to just handle like literally everything, like the operations of that event. And so I flew out with a mutual friend and we just rocked that event. And then afterward, I remember having dinner with him when the event was finished and everything had gone so well. And he was like, would you just like come help me like behind the scenes of this company that I'm trying to build, Healthpreneur? Because he'd had his mastermind and he's like, I have this really cool idea for this program. And I don't know if you know, but the Health Business Accelerator, it took off and it took off pretty well. And it was great. I was like, oh yeah. So I remember like Yuri and I tackling that. He's like, I have this great idea for this workshop and it's going to get these amazing health practitioners online and in the homes of more people that they can serve. And I was like, I love this vision. Let's like create the vehicle. Let's like do that thing. So it was me and a social media manager. He had a podcast too at the time. But for the most part, it was just the three of us. And, his company scaled pretty massively. They had needs to bring on a full-time operations manager because they'd experienced so much massive success. And I got replaced by a full-time operations hire, which was like honestly really gratifying. I was like, this is super cool. Like, I love this. And just kind of rinsed and repeated those types of projects in the past where either for a few years I would be fractional operations and really just kind of partnering with whatever the vision was, right? Like, I think that's where a lot of folks struggle is like, I have this vision. I know in my brain like how it could go. And then I get stuck with like the nitty gritty details or like closing the final loops and making sure that we press launch and then operationalizing that thing. So it's been really fun to get a wide variety of different types of projects and just see massive success.
That's fun. So you are, yeah. Okay. Question I have, because I'm going to lead into this, like mom. I don't really like the word mompreneur, but it kind of defines a person. But you say that you don't have to choose between growing your business and growing your family. I want you to answer that. However, before that, I want you to define to us what operationalize means.
Yeah. So a lot of companies, they do this feast or famine thing, right? Like build, launch, build, launch, build, launch, build, launch. And then what they really need to do is close the loop and build, launch, operationalize, build, launch, operationalize. And so what operationalizing means is that just like when you learn new habits when you're a kid, right? When you learn to tie your shoes, you don't forget how to brush your teeth, the thing that you learned before that, right? Those habits compound on one another and they become so ingrained in who we are and how we operate, so much so that they are done without virtually thinking, right? And so in our business, that looks like operationalizing something where either we have a person who now, actually controls that outcome and is actually responsible for that outcome, or we have an automation or a piece of technology that is responsible for that outcome. Or we scrap it completely. Like, I want to just be totally honest that part of operationalizing something is like, we did this, it didn't quite work. So like, let's just put that aside because it didn't bring anybody life. It didn't bring us more revenue. It didn't bring our clients more success. So like being too afraid to say no. And then we get these like really bloated agencies. I work quite a bit in the digital agency space. This is where we get the like full service, full stack agencies because they did one programmatic design one time and they were like, oh, well, we do programmatic. And you're like, no, you don't. You did it once. You never operationalized it. And if somebody came to you and said, I want programmatic, you'd be like, and you'd freak out. So it's habit stacking really is what I feel like operationalizing is behind the scenes of a business.
Because I think of it as like the technology that we install on the back end that kind of speaks to each other.
Well, that's an element of it, right, Renee? Like, I don't think that's totally wrong. The way that I see operations is kind of like a Venn diagram of sorts, especially for a small business, right? Because I think we need to kind of toss away all of the red tape and even the tractions of the world. Like, EOS is awesome, but EOS also takes like a year to implement, and it's a really disciplined practice. So it's not for all companies. And you can create some simple operation structure to really catapult you to the next level and like do so peacefully. That doesn't need to be super complicated. So if you think of the kind of 3-ring Venn diagram, you've got your process, which is like the how-to, right? The specific approach, how you're doing that. That can go all the way up to your proprietary process that you actually trademark and brand. And it can go all the way down to this is how we upload stuff on social media and the types of clips that we make for YouTube and Instagram or whatever that looks like for you. Then we've got our people, right? So how comfortable are our people with our process, right? Do they understand the step-by-step? Do they understand the outcomes that we're really looking for, the way that we transform clients? And then we've got our systems. So ideally, the systems manage the people to the process, right? And so if we can kind of see those all overlapping with one another, those 3 big components, a lot of people think systems and processes are the same thing. And that's why they think that any shiny new project management tool is going to save their life in productivity, which newsflash, it totally won't unless you actually use it. So it's a tough one because a lot of folks will be like, oh, well, I've got Monday.com. And I'm like, great. What's in the Monday.com? Like, do you have specific dependencies set up? And does it have a how-to process on how this goes? Because if it doesn't, you've got a beautiful tool that frankly you're overpaying for. It's not bringing you a ton of results.
So what's the main difference between process and system?
So process is the how-to. Process doesn't rely on any piece of technology, right? For the most part. If your transformation, so you've got standard operating procedures. I've heard a lot of folks too talk about like proprietary processes, right? So intellectual property, like Taki Moore's attract, convert, deliver. That's a proprietary process. That's how he supports his people. So that's an incredible process. He's trademarked that. He's taught it to hundreds of different coaches at this point, maybe thousands. And if you, Taki Moore.
Oh, Taki. Okay.
Yeah. Like if you look at his content, it's actually really, really like process driven. Like he's got really solid framework. So all of that is process. And the cool thing is he can teach it to his clients. He can teach it to his team coming in, like coaches that are coaching on his behalf, people behind the scenes that are getting things teed up and pinging folks and keeping them accountable. I mean, process bleeds into pretty much anything you do.
Okay. And then system.
just how you manage it, right? So I've got coaching students, they're going through my core process, attract, convert, deliver, and I put them into this platform and it pings them, reminds them, sends them useful content. It's really just the system is how it's set up, and we can lump automation in, right, with the systems, right? So if you're using Zapier, if you're, you can kind of leverage the automation function of setting up a really good system and not necessarily need to hire every single time you bring on additional revenue, right?
I'm actually drawing this model. And I'm like, I love being educated. So the middle part's the operations, and there's like overlap between the other. Is there anything significant there, like people and process systems?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, where people and process overlap, that's where you get your internal knowledge base. So when we're working with Dan and SaaS Academy on creating their internal knowledge in Notion, and it's updated really, really elegantly, I think like that, having a place where people can go and be like, how do I do blank? It'll really, really decrease operational drag in the business, right? Because then you've got a high paid person sitting on calls with team members all day who have no idea what they're doing and need a ton of handholding and direction. So that's internal knowledge. Where process and system overlap is where you get your automations, right? If we can tell something how to input this data into this system without a person touching it, that's where we can make that move faster. And then not having this in front of me is a bit of a challenge because usually I also draw it. But then when where the systems and the people, yes, there we go. Where the systems and the people overlap is where you have your project management, right? Or your systems management. So let's just say, for example, it's where all the tasks are kept for your particular projects. If you're building a new website, right, and you manage all of that in Monday.com, your people jump into your project management tool. They check those boxes. It can help hold your people accountable.
Cool. Okay. So now we're going to come back. Thanks for that, by the way.
Yeah, totally.
Ali's School 101.
Yeah. I have a 17-minute video about this.
It's quite ugly. I drew that. I'm going to scan this and put it in at the show notes, and I'll sign it.
No, you should just take my video. I have a free 17-minute video. It's no opt-in whatsoever. I'll send it to you guys. And then that way you can drop it in the show notes so that everybody can just see. Like, I love this elegant framework because I think everybody gets really overwhelmed when they think about operations. It's almost like, and I describe this as Russian nesting dolls. Like, you open one up and then there's another one under, and then you open it and you just kind of keep going.
The ones where it gets really, really small.
Yeah.
The high-end ones, like the cheap ones from the dollar store, not so good because you only get like $3 or $4.
Yeah.
Okay. So then let's go back to the question or the statement. You say you don't have to choose between growing your business and growing a family, because you and I share something very in common, is that our kids are very close in age. My yours are a little bit younger, right?
Yeah, mine are a little younger. Yeah, ours are 17 months apart. Frank's, ours are a little younger than yours. So Frank is 3 and then Jack is 22 months. So almost 2.
Yeah. Wow. Those are probably the toughest ages right now. For me, was between 2 and 4.
Yeah. Lots of opinions right now. Lots of like autonomy and boundaries being tested. But yeah, like I come back to this concept about growing your business and growing your family, because I think a lot of business owning women feel like they're just pulled in fundamentally 2 different directions, like all day. Renee, like when you share about, some of the challenges that you guys have been, working through with Noah and his health and being that voice and being that intuition and really standing up for what's right and well for your child, that doesn't go away. Like as that problem continues to be solved, you bring that, you carry it most places with you, right? You carry it in your work and you carry it in the way that you serve. And that doesn't go away, that piece of you. And I think like when I first became a mom, that really challenged me because I've always prided myself on being prided. I've prided.
I think it's just pride.
I pride myself.
We're not going to test it on this.
On just like being a compartmentalizer, right? Like you work on one project and that feels really good. And then you hang up your hat and you go do your thing. But motherhood has tested me and encouraged me in a lot of ways around integration, around integrating my life, around integrating some of the goals and the values and the things that I bring into the business that I also bring into my family. And so when I think about this concept of like work-life integration, that like if the business is growing or if your family is literally growing, like if you're inviting a new child into the home, wouldn't we, if we had such an integrated life, be able to grow those 2 together, right? One wouldn't have to suffer at the hand of the other. So I think maternity leave specifically, and one of the reasons why I'm so fascinated by this experience of entering into motherhood or inviting another child into the home is it almost creates this metamorphosis effect that launches us into the new stratosphere of growth and what it looks like to run a business and grow a family. So I think it's a cool opportunity.
Yeah, I think it was Dan that said, and he must have gotten this from somewhere else, but he's like, he actually really thoroughly enjoyed hiring mothers to their male counterparts because moms have their crap together. And if you want to get something done, give it to a mother. Because he has a way that can, like, because if it's just like the saying, if you're given 2 hours to do a task, you'll take 2 hours to complete the task.
Yeah.
If you're given 30 minutes, you'll get it done in 30 minutes as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so mothers have an uncanny way of getting so much done, maybe to the point of their detriment where it overwhelms them and burns them out, because I was also there.
Mm-hmm.
But in my experience as a mother and growing a business, the foundation of my success came from me being okay to ask for help.
Mm-hmm.
And that was in business, that was at home, that was with family. When we created these systems, it was like I tried to remove myself from majority of the equations so that, as you will say, I wasn't needed.
Mm-hmm.
And as a joke, our teams internally, we created our own playbooks. So if someone was to go on a vacation, the number one rule that they had was they had to create their own SOP for the time they were gone, because someone probably had to do some of the work. And they went to town on these SOPs. They made them pretty and they added stories, and it was so cool. But then that ad was just added to our manual for the business.
It's amazing.
But we had this saying that we'd say, hit by the bus syndrome.
Yeah.
So it's like, if you were hit by a bus and you couldn't come to work tomorrow, then who can take over your tasks? It's really important that employees understand that they're respected and trusted, but also know that things happen in life. So we kept saying, what happens if you're hit by a bus? And then on a sales call one day, we found out that one of the co-founders of the company was actually hit by a bus and was out. He was okay.
Oh my God.
I was like, okay, this is a real life example now. We can't use this anymore. The point being that there are going to be instances in your life when you have a sick kid or daycare calls or school calls, and you have to reshuffle things, and this happens. Is your system set up to be in a position where somebody can take over or that thing can be rescheduled easily? Now, assistants help, VAs help, but even like to systematize that. So what do you say about things like that? Because we think of like motherhood in terms of being distracted, and a lot of these things happen. Even today, like this week, Noah was sick on Monday. I had to move things around, but I'm so used to this now after like 11 years of this happening. What do you say to the moms out there that are growing their businesses and they know that they have those days where they're just totally derailed by their children?
Yeah. So I think there's a couple of things I'll say to this. First is that ultimately we create our environment, right? We're able to create our habits every single day and pour into the business in a way that feels like it creates stability and revenue and growth and impact. So starting first and foremost with us and our habits and the way that we are pouring into the business is going to be really helpful, because I find that the moms that get the most derailed by kiddos are the ones that know in some capacity that they've been phoning it in, right? They've been operating at 40%, 60% capacity. They're like, oh, I'm not really doing everything I can to grow my business. I'm not really positioning offers that are aligned. I don't love my business. I'm not keeping super healthy habits. And then when their kid gets sick, everything comes crumbling down. And then who do we blame but our child? And that's a shame. It's a shame for them. It's a shame for us as a mom. We start to feel super guilty. So like for me, if I'm in a position where I know I've won the day and I've won the last 25 consecutive days and I've shown up and I've given it my all and I'm working on my business growth and I'm leading my team, looking at the right metrics, like doing the things, putting in the work, making sure that I'm not sacrificing for the things I know that are important in my business and in my life. I'm working out every day. I'm drinking my water. I'm not drinking alcohol. Like those things are important to being a present mom that don't get shaken when the kid gets sick. And so I think that oftentimes we project our inadequacies or our lack of organization or our lack of showing up. And then when something derails us, quote unquote, then we feel the big shake of that and we blame the thing that's standing in front of us. But the question is if I've been operating really, really well the past 25 days, if my kid gets sick tomorrow, I'll be like, hey guys, I'm out. I can take a day because I'm confident that I've put in enough work over the last 25 days that taking one day isn't going to disrupt me.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point.
It's tough to hear probably, but it's true.
So for me, it was really, it's so easy to blame, right? It's so easy to project the excuse on my child.
Mm-hmm.
But even this is like when my kids were younger and when they're sick, they required a lot of extra attention as opposed to today.
Yeah.
Now they can just watch a show and they're fine for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt guilty not being totally present when they're sick, but there are moments when it's like, I don't have to sit there and watch my kid be sick. He's laying there watching a show and he's got a little bit of a fever, but he's fine. I could actually step away and do some work, of which I did.
Mm-hmm.
And do some work for me in those moments was really just checking in on the team and saying, hey, I needed to send this email. Can you do this for me? These are the meetings that I had. I need to reschedule. But the through line in all of it, and I know this is for you as a mother and for the listeners, is the guilt that came with it too.
Yeah.
Right. The guilt was like, our society says that you're supposed to be completely devoted to your children, but also your business. Like you're supposed to do it all. How dare you take time away from work for your sick kid?
It's tough. And, so I'll say two things to this, right? When you were talking just before about the power of hiring a mom, right? Like getting stuff done in a short period of time, like you hire a mom, that's what you do, right? And I think us moms expect that from ourselves too, especially in our business. So if everything relies on us, if we're a solopreneur, if we have a small team and we still shoulder the responsibility, we can't seem to get some of that stuff delegated, we will feel the guilt and the disruption if we have a mile-long to-do list and we get, pushed aside to go and tend to our child. So the guilt comes in both places because our business is our baby too.
Yeah.
Right? And so we feel the guilt both sides. I think moms who run their own shops are uniquely guilt factored. Like it's crazy. And I think that's the challenge is that we expect that from ourselves. So we need to release some of that. We need to be more comfortable asking for help like you brought up early on. And additionally, I think giving our clients, the people we work with, the businesses we support, the space to support us. Like if we don't tell them, hey, listen, I'm a mom with 2 kids and I'm here to get stuff done for you and make an impact for you. And if one day I hit you up and I'm like, my kid has the flu and I can't be there, trust that I'm still going to deliver on the promises that I make. And we need to have the confidence to allow people to allow us to bring in that bandwidth. I know so many people who are afraid to tell their clients about their family and so many people who are afraid even to tell their clients that they're pregnant because they're afraid that they're going to leave them or judge them or do whatever. And most people who come back and tell me, hey, Allie, I just told my client that I'm pregnant. They responded so positively. It was incredible. So I think we prejudge how folks are going to react based on whatever it is, preconceived, set of opinions that we have. And we just need to let people respond the way that they're responding. And you know what? Perhaps if you tell somebody that you're pregnant and they're on your client roster and they respond like kind of an a-hole, then maybe they're not supposed to be our client anymore. And maybe that's for the best.
Yeah. And also it can be jarring. I remember one client, I forget what happened. It was something about, I think it was one of my kids being sick. I just remember how I felt. So I don't remember the details of the story, but she didn't have kids and didn't want to have kids. That was just like, she wasn't having kids, but I had sick kids and I was literally like holding sick kids and on conference calls. And she kept questioning if I was going to deliver the stuff on time. And I was like, I'm not going to. And it was I felt so insulted and put in my place. And then that just contributed to the guilt. And then I remember working till 9 or 10 or 11 o'clock at night to get the stuff done so that I could deliver when things were supposed to be delivered. And you know what? In hindsight, there were people on my team that could have done it for me. And they probably would have been more than happy to, knowing especially where I was with my kids. We just forget that that's an option sometimes.
Totally.
Forget that we can ask for help. We forget that we can delegate. And They might not do it perfectly, but chances are they will do it better than you did in the first place.
Yes.
That has always been the scenario here. So what we do when we hire somebody new on, we pretty much, any employee goes through a contract position first. And prior to that, they do a test project. So paid for a test project, it gives them the opportunity to realize whether or not they want to work with us. They get paid, we hire them, and then we're still testing them. Like, if somebody is fit for the job, they will understand what needs to get done. You have to guide them. This is where SAP come into place. But it's not your job to sit there and hold their hand through everything. You got to give the autonomy to potentially fail, but also to potentially provide something more valuable than you could ever imagine.
Totally. And I think it's challenging because it's like the lack of trust, right? We don't trust ourselves to deliver the type of leadership that would make somebody be able to perform. We don't trust them, right? We don't trust their skill set, their, whatever, they bring to the table. And then we also build a habit, perhaps, of jumping over them, right? So I know so many founders who struggle with this. They'll be like, oh, well, they didn't do it right, so I'm just going to do it. And then that shows that person that you actually don't trust them. You don't have confidence in their ability. You don't expect them to really make this their own and thrive. And it's hard because I think moms do that too. I mean, how many times have I've been guilty of this. Like, I'll send Steve over to the grocery store and then he'll come back with some stuff that's kind of like what I asked for, but like not entirely.
Then you go,
I'll be like, oh, I'm just going to do this now. Right. And I'm going to go back out. But
suspicion that men do these things really terrible on purpose. Like massages so that they are not ever called on to do it again.
That might be something worth unpacking for sure.
I'm like, Dan, can you massage me? And his little finger and he just goes in. I go, oh, just stop. That's annoying. He's like, okay.
All right, I'll be on now. Oh, that's funny.
Oh, so going back to those moments, and I mean, I would love to think that I was a decent leader when I first started. I had no clue what I was doing. And I would jokingly say, showing up to like our all team meetings every Monday morning, be like, hey guys, good morning. I don't know what process. Welcome to the journey. And they laughed. No, but for real, I don't know what I'm doing. But it's all about like creating the capacity, right? In your life, so creating capacity.
Yes.
About that freedom where it's like, you've set up, you've operationalized your business, you've operationalized your family life too, to the point where when you get hit by the bus, whatever that means, is that things will just keep moving forward.
Yeah. And that doesn't mean that you're not critical in some way to your own life or your own business, right? I mean, if we were in a position to be gone entirely or checked out entirely, like things may turn a different direction, especially with your kids, right? Like you don't want to be an absent parent or you don't want to be so focused on work that you forget to be home. I think it's a challenge to imagine that capacity for yourself. I think too, as you're kind of in the thick of it in those early stages, postpartum and early stages of growing a business and everything relies on you, it seems to feel often like we don't have enough time. And, fortunately for you, Renee, you live with like the best time hacker probably in the greater North America. But it's actually really true. Like something profound that I read in Dan's book last year was around time assassins particularly. And I thought that was really like massively beneficial for moms to hear because, I mean, mommy wine culture is like just ridiculous. I mean, the fact that you need to go and have several drinks at the end of your day because you feel like you need to escape or unload or unwind about the things that are happening, like go change the things that are happening in the day or do something in that time that you would have otherwise been tying one on to go create a different reality for yourself, right? And I noticed that like when I stopped drinking in the evenings, like my husband and I'll share a cocktail, like if we're out on like a couples thing, like we just went to Austin a couple weeks ago and like spent some time as a couple and like we had a cocktail. And I even remember waking up that morning and I was like, man, I don't even know if this is worth it. And it's so funny because he was like, me too. And so we're not like in the position where we feel like it's a hard no or a hard yes, but like we notice those things in our bodies. And I encourage moms too, who feel like they're lacking a ton of time or they feel like they can't grow their capacity to just start to look at some of the things that they might be doing that are super wasteful. Like drinking alcohol or like watching too much television and doing some of those types of things. I think a lot of the things that we're conditioned to believe are very quote unquote normal aren't actually, and they're not serving us. And so even if it's just for a season, right? Like give up some of that stuff, try it out, take 90 minutes in the evenings to create some systems, create something that someone could easily take over for you. I think that would be a better use of pretty much everybody's time than like drinking a couple glasses of wine or watching whatever's hot on Netflix. So creating your capacity, like it's hard, like it'll require some sacrifices, but the question that you need to ask yourself is, are you willing to make those sacrifices to grow the capacity of your life, of your family, of your business, right? Because that's ultimately what we're deciding against. Like if so much of this depends on our time, right? This is like exactly Dan's mantra. Like if it depends on our founder time, like we need to be really intentional about how we spend that. We can't just be throwing it away in every direction.
So two things here. One is little system. This reminded me of something that we do at home. Is most of our children are more capable of doing more things. It's just our society thinks mom needs to make lunches every day up until they're
Totally.
Right? Do what? My kid cooked on a first hot stove. So this was Max 2 years ago. So he would have been maybe 8-ish years old.
Nice.
8 or 9 years old. Cooked eggs on the stove alone. And this is like a gas stove. And the kids aren't stupid. He's not going to just sit there and catch his hair on fire.
Yeah, totally.
So he cooked his own food and like, it was great. So it really made us realize, oh my gosh, these kids are so capable. Now they do their own laundry. I was 18 years old when I learned how to use a washing machine.
Isn't that wild?
I go, thanks, Mom, for like really sending me out in the world. But in my mom's mind, the more I did for my kids, the better mom I was.
Totally.
I had to go head to head with Dan on this too, because I'm like, well, I'm not a good mom if I'm not making their lunch and doing their laundry. No way, I'm a terrible mom. Some people would say I'm a terrible mom. But really, now I look at, if we're the launch pad for their lives, we're not setting them up to launch, because they don't know how to do their own laundry. They do it now, and it's not how I would do it, but I'm not going to judge, because they don't fold their clothes. They just shove it in their drawers. And I'm like, I don't have to do it anymore. Their lunches. Oh my God. They have a process at the end of the day. They come home, they have to put all their stuff away. If they have wet mitts, they have to put it on the dry rack. They have to unpack their lunch, repack their lunch, and then put it in the fridge overnight. And they have to do their chores, and then they can do whatever they want.
I love it.
First year, it was tough. But guess what happens now? Second nature. It's like robotic. They do it. They get it done. No one's complaining. No one's whining. And I don't have to worry about lunches. Never have they forgotten a lunch. The other thing, too, which helped me, is I love Cal Newport. He's got such a great podcast and book. And one of his things about, like, he talks a lot about productivity. And the one thing he says is, like, if you have a work day, commit to working the same hours every day. It's kind of like people that used to go to work for 9 to 5 and they could only actually operate between 9 to 5. They don't bring their work home. Our society now enables working 24 hours. So he goes, decide on what time of day is your endpoint. If it's 4 p.m. or 5 p.m., you literally turn off your computer and you stop working, and you create this wind down routine of like checking the calendar for the next day, making sure your desk is clean, and then you turn off your computer, which is the signal that you're done work for the day and you're not coming back to it. That, I need that reminder. But as I'm working on that, it's almost like I'm at peace now, because I was given permission to stop work at 4 o'clock. And now when I go be with my kids, I'm with my kids. Or if I want to go work out or be with my husband, and I can't allow myself to feel guilty for not working. Because then it also gives my clients the idea that I'm always on. And if there's a day where I'm not responding at 9 p.m., they'll question, well, is she even efficient? Because we're so used to this communication, and now she stopped communicating. So in our contracts with our retainer clients, we put in there, we are unavailable on Mondays. We're only available between 9:30 and 4 p.m. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and until noon on Friday. It's not like we're not working other times. It's just that we might not get back to you because we're actually doing the work on those days. Stuff you hired us to do. And I hate, like, we used to do weekly phone calls. Now we'll do 2 phone calls a month, check in. They get a quick little report on Fridays to just show them the activities that's going on within the work that we're doing. It's so simple. It's not bulky at all. My proposals are just an email. There's no fancy attachments or
exactly
presentation. I'm like, I'm done with that. If you need that because you need to present it to somebody, we'll do something. But in the last year and a half, I have not submitted a formal proposal for anybody. There's a client on the East Coast that was going through a grant. And part of the grant was getting marketing funding from some organization to hire me to help them create a PR strategy, like what I did for you. And they wanted me to do a formal proposal. And I said, nope. And I just filled out like a PDF and I sent it to them, and that worked because they had the information. But I was like, I'm going to cut corners here. What do they really need?
It comes down to trust though, right? I mean, sure, folks have formal proposal and budget things, but I think at the end of the day, somebody's going to hire you if they trust you and if they like you, right? If they feel like they can connect. And I think all the rest of it's just fluff. And when you kind of strip that out and just say, okay, what are you really afraid of here? What are you really looking for here? If you can ask those penetrating questions, I find that folks end up really being honest with you and telling you what's up.
Yeah. And they like it too, because it also gives them the permission to not be so formal.
Totally.
Okay. So say I'm a mom going on mat leave, or I'm going on some sort of sabbatical, or I'm going away on vacation for 1 or 2 weeks. What's the process to start to prepare my business to take that time off?
Yeah, totally. So I work with moms, obviously preparing for maternity leave, but this is super approachable and applicable for any mom who wants to say, like, take a slower summer too, for like their kids' sake, right? If the kids are home from school, and this is seasonal, right? Like moms do this. I did this in the summer with my kids. It just happens. And business needs to look a little bit different. And what I start to do is one of the things that you actually mentioned, Renee, is start to create those boundaries. So like shutting the computer at 4, like hard stops. I'm not doing this. Blocking your weekends out and seeing how that feels. When I was postpartum with my first son, Frank, I was absolutely rocked by the fact that my business was like tethered to me like a ball and chain. And I loved what I did. And so that was the challenging part, was I was really forced to reconcile with the fact that I loved what I was doing. So I did it all the time, all hours. My husband was also, remember, in the military at the time. So he was gone 50% of the time on trainings. I had no like personal life boundary. I could just work. I was, really heavy into supporting clients at the time. And it was something that I really enjoyed. And so when he came, I remember sitting in the hospital bed and my husband snaps this photo of us. And I was so relieved to like be done with birth, but my hair was like still messy. However, like that works because you're just like so sweaty. But I cherished that photo. And there's like a small sliver of me that also remembers that literally just after he's like sleeping in the picture, I put him next to me in the bassinet and I just picked up my phone and I started slacking my team. I was like, we need to do this. And my baby was born and I'm going to be out for the next 2 days. And I remember thinking, like, thank God he was born on a Thursday, because I infamously took Fridays off like forever and a day. Like I've always taken Fridays off for my business. And I was like, thank God he was born on a Thursday, because I only
understood the assignment.
Yes. I only missed 1 day. And so I was back on Monday, back the next day, or back 2 days later. And it was so challenging because I don't know why. And maybe it's as like one of the things that we do as moms, but like we feel like we need to shoulder all the responsibility, or we're going to be able to figure it out. And we don't like take a step back for a second and think like, who could I tap on the shoulder to support me, or how could I prepare for some of this stuff? And I'm not saying that moms aren't traditionally preparers, but I think like when it comes to our own needs, that isn't almost exactly true. Like we prepare for others, right? We'll pack the lunches and we'll set the schedule and make sure everybody's good for pickup and drop off, but we won't support ourselves in preparation oftentimes, right? We show up all messy with our hair in a bun to do the things, but our kids are like beautifully clothed in hair scope.
Is like the mental load of I was just sharing this the other week, the mental load of worrying about making sure people are at the right place where they need to be. Are they getting picked up? And I apologize for this, but I forgot to message my son's best friend's mom, because she does their soccer. So she picks them up at the end of the day to bring them to soccer, and then we go and bring them home. And I always check in before, because I don't know if things have changed. And I realized that while we were recording, I was like, oh my God, Ella.
See, it never leaves us.
Dan doesn't have to worry about that. It's
Mm.
like the default parent, sometimes it's actually easy for us to do the thing than to coordinate with the other people to do it because the worry hangs over us that it's actually
Mhm.
getting done. Like if it was my
Yeah.
responsibility to pick them up at the end of the day, bring them to soccer and come home, I wouldn't have the worry. I would just be overwhelmed by the logistics of getting there. But I
Mhm.
carry now the worry that they're going to get to soccer, the worry that Bella remembers to bring them.
Yeah.
And that happens with the default parent. And so I have to work through this, but I also genuinely believe that the worry that especially moms have is one of the things that has allowed our species to survive. Because if
Totally.
you left it up to men, they ask you, they open the fridge door, they say, honey, where's the ketchup? And it's right in front of your face. Not a question their validity sometimes.
That's not untrue. I don't have 5 or 6 stories to support that, to support that theory.
Okay, so what are the quick steps to set people up for success if they're taking time off? And how far in advance should they be
Yeah.
doing?
Good question. So how far in advance would really just depend on like what level of access to budget you have, right? So if you've got somebody you can tap on the shoulder to pay them a high watermark to come in and do some of the things that you're doing with little to no training, then you can probably condense this into a few months. If you're really looking to kind of transform your business and kind of remove yourself and detangle from the day-to-day operations, as one of the big things I was really working through in the sabbatical method with like, how do we do that systematically in a way that also feels like it's not overtaking our entire business? Because a lot of us have to focus on growth. We got to focus on revenue generation. So what I do actually is this really simple principle that I call the 90-90 principle. And it's 90 minutes of focus for 90 days. It's super elegant. And what it's focused on is really creating a better version of our life or our business. So you could focus on your personal fitness in your 90-90, right? I've been neglecting working out. I don't go to the gym anymore. I don't seem to be able to find time. So I'm going to go ahead and block this 90 minutes to just like dump into my personal wellness cup, right? 90-90 could be focused. Like when I was writing my book, The Sabbatical Method, I literally got up and wrote for 90 minutes every single morning for 90 days. And my book was done in 90 days. And it was amazing. Yeah. And I was like, honestly, I had no idea. Like I had no belief that I could do it, which is like the craziest thing until I was like holding it in my hands. And it's really, really often that you don't believe you can do something. You can't actually create that belief in yourself until you start doing it, until you start doing something. So if you're having trouble delegating, if you're having trouble creating the appropriate systems in your business, just block 90 minutes in the morning and like commit to that, right?
You know
Commit
what's
to
hilarious is I opened your book on that.
on 90-90.
It's
Yeah.
a summary of that chapter, but the first thing that it says is choose one area of your business from which to take a sabbatical. This could be something as small as answering customer support emails, whatever it is.
Mhm.
Make it simple. Block 1 hour per week to work on it.
Yeah.
And then, but anyway, so you used your own method to write the book. You couldn't hear it, but I like put my hands up in the air when you're like, it's Amy's a 90-90 method. Because I tell my clients who went through the VIP day, like your team did, commit to 100 days of action. And it's like probably 2 to 4 hours a week and do it every single week for 90 days. And then you'll start to see the results. And you got the results. It may have been slow at first or not. I feel like you messaged me right away. You're like, I got them.
We had some low hanging fruit. So I definitely got a lot of really, really good traction in the beginning. But honestly, Renee, we did that. We were disciplined and operationalized the things that you taught us. And honestly, I mean, our PR strategy is better than ever. I feel like we've learned so much in the process. We've learned what works for us, what doesn't work for us. We've learned what people want to hear from us, but you only know that by putting in the reps. Like I think people treat, and this might be an aside, but hang with me here. I think people treat hacks and tips and tricks for startup. They're like, oh, this is a trick or a hack that's going to get me from 0 to 100 really, really quickly. Who the hacks, tips, and tricks are for the people who are already going 100 miles an hour, where a little tiny shift is going to make massive, massive momentum for them. And I think that is the challenge, is people want to see overnight results or success, but really the people who see that hockey stick, who see real big things happen really quickly, are people who've been doing it behind the scenes for years and years and years, or at least months and months, right, of getting something moving.
90 days is a really good framework because it's basically 3 months. So you're working in quarters, but you think of it anything like, in terms of getting healthy, well, maybe you can't lose the 40 pounds in 90 days, but you can definitely create the momentum and you can start seeing a lot of results in 90 days. 75 Hard is an example of this. So anything like operationalizing your business, doing PR, and that's palpable 90 days, right?
Exactly.
Like I want to work on having a really nice butt for the summer. And I to go 90 days. I even bought little bands that you tie on.
There you go.
And you pull them apart and it works your glutes. And I keep them at my desk. When I put the standing part up, I wrap it around and I just start doing these pulls. I got to start logging my 90 days. But anyway, I love this. So 90 minutes of focus for 90 days. That's a good starting point. How do you choose the thing that you should be focusing?
Yeah, so it'll really depend on your time, right? So if you take a look at what's happening inside of your business, if you're really the linchpin that's doing all the things, the project management, the fulfillment, and everything inside of the business, what you'll want to do is start there. Start with trying to like record your screen while you're doing some of those tasks. Like I think that would be absolutely beneficial to pretty much anybody who wants to start building that delegation muscle. You have a bunch of proof of how to do it and what's expected when the thing is done. So it's a really elegant way to start to get some stuff off of your plate and start to consider, honestly, I think even jumping into my 90/90, writing the book. I remember like doing this thing and creating the extra space for it because when I told my team I wanted to write a book, they were like, you're nuts. Your calendar is wild. Like you have so much like strategic time with your clients. Like I have no idea when you're going to get to do this. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to wake up 2 hours earlier. I'm going to wake up 2 hours earlier every single day. And I'm just going to go ahead and do it. And so I created the additional space. And then you want to know what happened? Some of those nasty habits in the evenings, streamline, watching too much Netflix, they kind of fell away so that they could accommodate these growth goals that I had. And I think
that with TikTok, I became obsessed with TikToks or Facebook videos because I have really good algorithm favoring me on Facebook right now that only delivers positive, happy stuff. And really it's about like puppies having puppies and like an animal. Anyway, but I noticed that it was eating into my sleeping time. So now I had to, and I recognize that. I also recognize that if I do CrossFit first thing in the morning, it opens up my entire day. I used to go at noon.
Totally.
Now I got to do so anyways. Okay.
It's cumbersome, right? To try to fit it into your schedule. So if you're creating the priority for, your life, like the way I currently spend my 90/90. So I'll wake up, I'll do some journaling, I'll read, and then I do the most important thing that I have to do for the day. And it's usually creating something. So like I'm doing this planning series, this email series for moms planning maternity leave. And I wrote like 9 or 10 of the emails this morning. And it was really fun. It was really life-giving. And I felt like if I had to open that document up when so much other stuff was swirling around in my brain at say like 1:00 in the afternoon, I probably wouldn't have written better content. It was way better, way early in the morning. And then I go right into my workout. So I'll go work out before the kids get up. That way I can be super present with them because a tired mom is a way more patient mom, in my opinion. I got a lot of thoughts swirling around in my head. I got high energy. And usually if I'm like with the kids and I feel like I got a lot of stuff to do, I'll be like wiping the counters and be like, you go do this and you go do that. So it helps me not feel like a little, I don't know, Napoleon in my own house. Yeah.
I love this super simple framework. Okay. We could speak all day, but
yeah, totally.
In importance to my operations. I have one last question for you. When I ask you what it means to be a wild woman, what is that to you?
Oh, one that isn't afraid or ashamed to do what's best for them. And I think we get a lot of negative stigma, especially as moms, on prioritizing us first. But I think if we do that and we do so in a way that doesn't create a dependency on like being a mom, right? Like we don't have to have traditional successful children or be that mom that does everything for their kids in order for us to feel better. Like our cup is full. We are satiated by what we are doing as an individual. And that overflow is what shows our kids what's possible versus wrapping up our entire identity in being a mom or wrapping up our entire identity in being a business owner or whatever that thing is like, no, I'm a me and I'm multifaceted and I'm always learning and I'll probably be different tomorrow than I am today. But like really pursuing that and not feeling ashamed or guilty for going after some of the things that you want and really prioritizing you.
I love it. So if people want to go online to find you, to buy your book or to follow you, where can they go?
Oh, yeah. So I'm super active on Instagram at Aly Caffrey. Give me a follow and I will probably strike up a conversation with you because that's how I roll. So there's that. Operationsagency.com has all of the book information and places to purchase that. And if you are an expecting mom planning maternity leave, I got a ton of free goodies over at mastermaternityleave.com.
Love it. Well, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Renee. I had a blast.